Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, Phil Berger has conceded in his race against Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page, a 23-vote margin there, plus a 15-point plan released by the United States as the war continues to rage between the United States and Iran. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Wednesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the program with you 24/7 on demand in your favorite podcast app by simply searching for the Nick Craig Show. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We have got some major North Carolina political news to kick off the program on this Wednesday. Senator Phil Berger, the president pro tem, the speaker of the North Carolina Senate, has officially conceded in his race to Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page. You have heard a lot about this contest over the last couple of weeks, and it is official. Just to kind of bring you through everything that has gone on over the last couple of days, there was a sample hand-eye recount that took place Tuesday in both Rockingham and Guilford County. The sample hand-eye recount picked a couple of different voting locations, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They literally looked at every single ballot, counted, and there was no difference in the vote totals from the original count to the machine recount that happened back last week, and then this sample hand-eye recount that happened on Tuesday. No margin, no change for Berger, and it wasn't long after that he released the following statement. While this was a close race, the voters have spoken, and I congratulate Sheriff Sam Page on his victory. Over the past 15 years, Republicans in the General Assembly have fundamentally redefined our state's outlook and reputation. It has been an honor to play a role in that transformation. Looking forward, I remain committed to working with my colleagues in the short session to ensure that North Carolina continues to be the best state in the nation in which to live, work, raise a family, and retire. In the months ahead, I will also do everything I can to support all Republican Senate candidates and protect our supermajority. That was the statement released by Phil Berger himself yesterday, not long after the sample hand-eye recount, as I mentioned, provided no difference in the vote total there. There were still are 13 voter protests outstanding from the Berger campaign, but even with those protests outstanding, there's not enough votes even there to make up the 23-vote margin. And I can say, in all honesty, that I'm thankful that this has played out the way that it is. Not necessarily the Berger won or lost, but the fact that this has not been and will not be dragged into a months-long legal battle that will mar the GOP. This was a tight race. 23 votes separated it. There was about 23,000 or so votes in the contest itself. 23 votes, very small margin there between the Rockingham County Sheriff and Sam Page and the Senate leader, Phil Berger. There was the real possibility that this went to a lengthy legal battle here across North Carolina, spanning on for months on end, with rather varying degrees of uncertainty as to exactly what was going to happen. That would have not benefited the Republicans here in North Carolina. That would not have helped in this short session in which I will contend that the Republicans have got to get a budget passed. They are getting hammered on this issue. They've got to work on this, and none of that would have been possible had there been an ongoing legal challenge, an ongoing lawsuit from Phil Berger against the contest in North Carolina's 26th Senate District. So from that vantage point, I am very grateful that Berger, seeing the results, and as he says, the voters have spoken, saying that right in the top of his statement, that it is playing out the way that it is. And I know that especially in online circles, which we are often reminded when we talked to Andrew Dunback a couple of weeks ago, he reminded us that the internet is not real life. And so I want to make sure I kind of clarify these comments, There's a lot of individuals that are very happy that Phil Berger lost, and we can talk about what has gone on in recent years, whether it was Medicaid expansion, the possibility of bringing legalized casinos to areas of the state, including one in and around Rockingham County. All of that is fine and dandy. But let's take a step back and look at the leadership that Phil Berger ushered in 2011. Folks, this is something that you are going to hear a lot from me as we go through the remainder of this year and we look at what will be very close races in the North Carolina General Assembly. North Carolina has not always been in the position that it is right now. Now, it's maybe hard for many of us to wrap our head around that if we have not been in the state of North Carolina since 2010, or maybe we weren't following politics as closely as we do now. This state was in a terrible position going into 2010. The state was broke. Democrats who had been running the North Carolina General Assembly for the better part of 100 years prior to 2010 had completely fleeced out the state of North Carolina. They owed the federal government hundreds of millions of dollars as it related to medical debt. The state had no rainy day fund. The taxes were some of the highest anywhere in the southeast half of the United States. North Carolina was on the side of decline. That is a very real thing here across the Tar Heel state. Now, it might sound hard to wrap your head around because things could not be any different as it compares to what I'm describing, but that was the very real situation that Phil Berger and Tom Tillis walked into in 2010. And fortunately, due to their very strong conservative leadership over the last couple of decade and a half, probably more accurately to say, that is not the case anymore. The state has a very large rainy day fund. We have just saw that play out in unfortunately the situation. Fortunately, the money was there with Hurricane Helene and all of the devastation left in the wake of Western North Carolina. The state wasn't broke when that storm hit. There was over $1 billion in the rainy day fund to help pay for some of the immediate costs that were needed to try and make portions of Western North Carolina whole again. Ladies and gentlemen, that does not happen with Democrat leadership. That does not happen with Democrats holding a majority in the North Carolina General Assembly. Don't believe me? Go look back at 100 years of Democrat leadership. Look at the years 2000 to 2010, and you can see what the Democrats plan to push forward here in North Carolina. It was the quintessential definition of tax and spend. They were continuing to raise not only the corporate tax, but your personal income taxes because they had a spending problem in Raleigh. They were unwilling to get their budget under control. And as we see, unfortunately, in example after example, that is how Democrats govern. That is how Democrats operate. They're not interested in being fiscally responsible. They're not interested in dealing with the issues at hand. No, it's just, hey, we need more of your money, so go ahead and cough it up. That is not what makes a state prosperous. That is not what encourages businesses to relocate or move to an area. Sky-high corporate income tax rates and sky-high personal income rates. That is not helpful for either of those two things. You can see right now what states that have been under Democrat control for a significant amount of time look like. I'll use as my examples New York and California, where Democrats run amok, where Republicans have very little, if any, leadership positions at all. And what does the end result look like? The taxes continue to go through the roof and people continue to leave. It's why there's so much mass migration from states like California and New York, with individuals seeking safer harbors somewhere else in the United States. And well, for many of them, at least from those in the Northeast, they're moving to North Carolina. And unfortunately, many of them are bringing their disastrous political ideology and their disastrous political agenda right alongside it, which I'll contend is not where we want to be here in North Carolina. We just don't. And so you can be as frustrated as you want about Phil Berger in recent years and frustrated over casinos and some other issues. But let's not forget the leadership that he ushered in here in North Carolina. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not saying he did everything right. But let's reflect on what we have right now as a result of him and other Republican strong leadership in the early 2010s. As we continue this discussion over Phil Berger conceding to Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page, that 23-vote margin, getting all of those details yesterday, going back, and I just want to read this part of the statement again to really drive home this point that I was just talking about over what the state was compared to what it is now. Over the past 15 years, Republicans in the General Assembly have fundamentally redefined our state's outlook and reputation. That is an absolute fact. You cannot debate that issue. Now, I guess you can try to debate the issue. And I've seen, of course, Democrats think that they're capable of leading North Carolina. There's no evidence to back that up. Actually, all of the evidence is to the contrary, that they're incapable of leadership. They're incapable of governance. We, again, have real life, real world examples not that long ago. Just go back 20 years and you can see that play out here in North Carolina. I am, again, very grateful that Berger is not taking this situation and dragging it out in a very lengthy, expensive, and ugly legal court challenge and battle of which we've seen in recent years. You can look at the Jefferson Griffin, Allison Riggs race that we saw at the beginning of 2025 after the November election in 2024. That would not have been beneficial because laying everything that I've laid out, and as we've talked about this and leadership over the last couple of weeks, we are just, in this case, 8-9 months away from Republicans losing a majority in the North Carolina General Assembly. And if you don't think that that is a major issue, if you don't think that that is absolutely terrifying, you need to go back and dig into some of North Carolina's history. You need to dig into what Democrat leadership looked like from the year 2000 to 2010. Because I can promise you and I can say absolutely, without a doubt, that is not the road that we want to head down here in North Carolina. If you want to be the next New York, if you want to be the next California, then absolutely have at it. If you want to have people that are getting squeezed by state government, squeezed by their county government, those that are seeing more and more of their paycheck going to fund a bloated bureaucracy that provides them nothing, then absolutely go vote for Democrats for the General Assembly later this year. I'm not interested in that. I have often said that we are in a golden age of North Carolina politics, and I believe that very well to be the case. Because what we are experiencing right now does not happen by accident. It doesn't. You don't just randomly wake up one morning and the state has strong conservative, strong Republican leadership that is guiding it in the direction that it is right now. You know, Josh Stein loves taking credit, and Roy Cooper, his predecessor, they love taking credit for all of these business announcements coming to the state, which they have the right to do. They're the governor, or currently the governor, the previous governor. Let's look at why those businesses are coming to North Carolina. It's not because there's a Democrat in the governor's mansion. It's because the General Assembly has a current plan in place to phase out the corporate income tax. It has continually trended down over the last decade. Same or similar situation with personal income taxes as well. A plan to continue to draw those amounts down to make your life more affordable. Right? Democrats are on this big affordability kick right now. You look at any left-wing media outlet, newspaper, TV, NPR, whatever, affordability. They love talking about and love using that phrase. But if you press them on affordability, like saying, hey, well, if you're talking about affordability, would you be interested in cutting taxes? The answer, of course, would be no. There's never been a Democrat that has been in favor of cutting taxes. But there's no benefit there because then they have less money to play with. They have less money to build up their out-of-control bureaucracy. So that's not going to be the case. And so again, regardless of what you think about Senator Phil Berger, whether you think he was doing a good job or not, this is the real implications of change in North Carolina. These are the real implications of Republicans not holding on to a majority. Now, I think the North Carolina Senate is safer than the House. Will the Senate still hold a supermajority? I'm not sure it's too far out to tell. There is a possibility, and I'm not saying it's a high likelihood, but there is a greater than 0% chance that Democrats flip the North Carolina House from Republican to Democrat, which would be the first time that that's happened since the 2010 elections. That should be a terrifying situation for you. And so I'll say this, again, regardless of what you think of Berger, it is time to coalesce behind the Republican majority in Raleigh, and now that includes Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page, and get behind these people. We cannot afford to infight over whether somebody is conservative enough or not in the General Assembly. If you dislike what you hear from Josh Stein, if you dislike what you heard from Roy Cooper, then you have to make sure that Republicans continue to hold the majority. And if you don't want that, if you're okay with Stein, if you're okay with Cooper, then fine. Have your infighting. Continue to take shots at each other. Have at it. But that's not what I'm interested in. I know the agenda that Josh Stein wants to usher in. Hopefully you are well aware of the agenda that he wants to bring to North Carolina. It is not beneficial for me. It is not beneficial for you. And it is not beneficial for in large part, the people of North Carolina. It's just not. Don't shoot the messenger on it. It's the truth. It is the very real impact of elections. Had Phil Berger been in his position maybe a little bit too long as the Senate leader? Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate statement. 16 years doing anything is, it might be time for a little bit of a change. His voters in Rockingham and northern Guilford County were seemingly unhappy. I think a lot of this revolved around casinos. This was a big debate back a couple of years ago in the North Carolina General Assembly that the state, right around the time it was legalizing electronic sports betting, that it would go forward and bring a couple, I think it was 3 casinos to the state of North Carolina, one of them in Rockingham County. That ticked off a lot of people in that area of the state, which is their right to be ticked off by that. Of course, I'll note that Danville, Virginia is literally right across the border of Rockingham County as the North Carolina and Virginia border meet. So there's literally a casino right there. Nevertheless, that frustrated a lot of voters. That caused a lot of pushback, and it led up to this perfect storm that is Berger now losing by 23 votes to the Rockingham County Sheriff. I'm very grateful for Phil Berger's leadership over the last 15 or 16 years. I very much appreciate the fact that he says in his statement that he remains committed to working with his colleagues in the North Carolina General Assembly in the short session to, quote, ensure North Carolina continues to be the best state in the nation in which to work, live, raise a family, and retire. And so there is a lot that is going to have to be done in this short session. A budget absolutely has to get passed by lawmakers, not a bunch of mini budgets, a full comprehensive budget. Because this is a growing political black eye for Republicans in the North Carolina General Assembly. Destin Hall, the House Speaker, and Phil Berger, the leader of the Senate, have to get together and get this thing hammered out. We cannot afford to lose the majority in the House or the Senate because we couldn't get together on a budget. We agree on 90% of the issues, and it is time for these lawmakers in Raleigh to get this job done and stop giving free political ammo to those on the left. Josh Stein is running around North Carolina talking about how we don't have a budget. It is a major political talking point for those on the left, and we should not continue to give them that ammunition to use against us. I appreciate Senator Phil Berger's leadership over the last 15 or 16 years. Congratulations to Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page. We'll see the general election come forward in November to see exactly how this race is going to play out. So that's, to me, that's the long and the short on this race. I know that a lot of people are of the mindset that Phil Berger was not doing a good job in the North Carolina General Assembly. I'd say so be it. And so that this whole situation played out, and as Berger noted, the voters spoke, the voters decided, and now we move on from it. And I appreciate that he says he is willing to move on from it, move on from it as well. But again, don't for 1 second diminish the astounding impact that Phil Berger had here across the state of North Carolina. the reason that many of you, myself included, are likely living in this state right now is in part because of the leadership that Phil Berger, Tom Tillis, and Tim Moore brought forward as leaders of the North Carolina House and Senate. Don't forget it. That doesn't mean that he's perfect. That doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve criticism, but he was instrumental in dramatically changing the way in which this state operates, the way in which this state governs, the way in which North Carolina continues to grow. We should not forget that. We should be appreciative of that. And, big question now is, what does Berger do moving forward? I mean, one of the things that has come to my mind is, does he look at a potential gubernatorial run? I'm serious. Who's going to take on Josh Stein in 2028? Where's the bench of candidates that are going to take on Stein? Somebody like Phil Berger has got the track record, he's got the name ID, and we sure as hell know he's got the ability to fundraise. So what does he do next? Does he, hang up his hat? He's been in Raleigh now for 25 years, being first elected to the GA in the year 2000, being sworn in 2001. What does he do from here? That is one of the the $1 million questions. I think we'll get some insight into that as we go through this short session, seeing how he operates, seeing how he governs, and see maybe if he's got something else up his sleeve, including I could think the possibility of running for governor and challenging Josh Stein in 2028. So we'll keep an eye on all of that and the continued fallout as this monumental North Carolina political news continues to unfold. We'll bring you the latest right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, we've got some international news that we're going to dive into. The war in Iran continues to rage. We'll get into those details coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support of the program and remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense. If so, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, ladies and gentlemen. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088 or visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088 or online at lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group. Experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate the Law Group, Melissa Gott, and her team for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. All right, the latest international news as it relates to Iran coming up as the Nick Craig Show continues. Streaming live this Wednesday morning, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Wednesday to you, and welcome back to the Nick Craig Show as we continue coverage of what is a very dynamic, volatile situation unfolding in the Middle East. The latest on the Iran conflict right now. We are learning details this morning about, now, about this 15-point peace plan that was unveiled by the Trump administration on Wednesday. And of course, the Iranians are firing back. Now, before we get into this plan, you'll remember earlier this week, it was, I believe it was on Monday, President Donald Trump announced that he had had conversations with top Iranian officials with, top is probably a subjective term there because most of the top leaders within the Iranian regime have been killed by the United States and Israel with a barrage of airstrikes, that he had had good conversations and that things were trending hopefully in the right direction, announcing that he was not going to move forward with completely obliterating Iran's electrical infrastructure. It was going to put a 5-day pause on that, which will bring us towards the end of this week. And it was fascinating because the Iranians immediately shot back and said, we have not had any conversations. And lo and behold, mainstream American media were believing the Iranians instead of President Donald Trump. Now, I understand that these people not only hate Trump, but they hate you and me, and I would argue in large part they hate America in large part. But you have to be completely insane to take the word over some random quote-unquote leader in Iran over the words of President Donald Trump. I mean, what kind of reality are we living in where you are taking the words of an obliterated regime who the current supreme leader, which was the previous supreme leader's son, may be dead? We have literally not seen this guy since it was announced that he is the new Ayatollah in Iran. We have literally not seen this guy. So he is either A, dead, or B, so injured that he cannot be seen publicly. And yet, CNN, the Washington Post, NBC, ABC, CBS, the New York Times, all of the usual suspects are saying, well, Donald Trump says this thing, but the Iranians are saying the other. And in this case, we tend to believe the Iranians. Really? That's the group that you're deciding to believe? The group that says, oh, we're not spinning centrifuges. We're not working on building a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, they've got a nuclear armament facility like buried under a mountain that the United States had to blow up last year. That's the side that you're taking. That's the group that you're saying, yep, these are our guys right here. Whatever comes out of their mouth, take it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, really? That's where we're at with the level of discourse in America? That the hatred is so strong for Donald Trump that you're taking the word of a regime that no longer has a leader, a group that has been consistently the largest state sponsor of terror anywhere across the globe. You're taking their word over Trump's? How ridiculously stupid. How incredibly petulant do you have to be to take Iran's word over Trump's? Nevertheless, that is exactly what they did. And so, to the chagrin of them, it would appear that conversations are actually taking place. Just getting some detail in, Pakistan has apparently forwarded this 15-point plan from the United States to Iran. However, a venue for any talks between Tehran and Washington, D.C. have not yet been decided. That is according to a senior Iranian official talking to the Reuters news service. So it would appear very clearly that talks are taking place. And so here is a copy of here is some of the plan in which this administration is laying out to bring peace to the Middle East on this situation. Iran must dismantle existing nuclear capabilities. That's no surprise there. They must commit to never pursuing nuclear weapons. No uranium enrichment on Iranian territory. Iran must hand its stockpile of enriched uranium to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. A couple of other things. The IAEA must be granted full access to those nuclear facilities. The nuclear facilities across the country have to be dismantled. They must abandon their regional proxy situation. You've got Hezbollah and other groups operating in Lebanon that the Iranians are funding. They must cease funding, directing, and arming their proxies. The Strait of Hormuz, this is a big one, must remain open. That is the large oil shipping channel that is right off the Iranian coast. Their missile program must be limited in both range and quantity, and they must limit Iran must limit its use of missiles to self-defense. And so here are the benefits. This is what the United States is saying. We are going to give you in return if you meet these demands. The end of sanctions imposed by the international community, which would be big for the Iranian economy. U.S. assistance to advance its civilian nuclear program. This would be used for power generation and providing cheap, affordable energy to the Iranian people. And a, quote, snapback mechanism allowing for the automatic re-implementation of sanctions if Iran fails to comply would be removed. And so this is the deal that is being laid out. And, you've really got to look at this critically as it relates to the situation that is unfolding. What cards does Iran have left to play? I mean, let's be as objective and down the middle on this as possible. Over the last couple of weeks, every single day, strategic airstrikes have continued to take place across the region. The Iran leadership has been decimated. I mean, every top leader, every top general has been blown to pieces by both the United States and Israel. There is no head of the Iranian government right now. As I was just mentioning, the Ayatollah's son is apparently in charge. I don't believe that for 1 second. This guy has not been seen anywhere. You've got a bunch of mid-ranking level generals that are apparently speaking for the entire country. They're promoting different messages because their communication infrastructure has been decimated. Their ability to communicate with each other is not sufficient right now. It is a total free-for-all in Iran. They have been decimated. Their navy, the U.S. sunk 120 some odd Iranian ships that could have been used. Every single day that goes by, they are continuing to deplete the missiles that they have left. What kind of position are they in? I mean, when you're thinking about negotiating, right? What you've got to wonder from your side, if you're the Iranians, what do we have left to negotiate with? And the answer is, to me, not really anything. And if the Iranians refuse to at least sit down and have this meeting or have a meeting with the United States, if that's truly the case, the president has already foreshadowed what's going to happen. He is going to strategically target their electrical infrastructure. And at that point, you're going to have mass blackouts throughout the country, and it's going to be all over. With an electrical grid and an oil facilities that are just completely decimated, what's left? What's going to keep the people, quote unquote, in line when they've got no electricity, no oil, and really nothing going on? That's the situation that Iran is looking down the barrel at. In this case, there's not much room for them to negotiate. They decided and have decided over the last couple of decades. I mean, you go back to the Obama administration when the placation of Iran really began. They tried screwing around in the first Trump administration. We held them in line. And now this situation was, to me, completely and totally predictable. It is pretty surprising to me that the narrative, that the messaging out of Iran continues the way that it is right now. Because again, they have nothing to negotiate with. They have no cards to put on the table. They're sitting there at a round of high stakes poker. Not only do they not have a good hand, they don't have any cards. They weren't dealt into the hand. They're just sitting there. And that gives you no ability to play the game. That gives you no leverage as it relates to negotiation. Absolutely none. And so I would suspect in the coming days that you are going to start to see a very different tune out of the Iranian leadership. I truly believe that, because there's every single day that goes by, the more and more ballistic missiles they try and shoot over at Israel that are immediately shot down by the Iron Dome system. It's just not working. They're not making any inroads, and they're losing ground seemingly each and every day. And so this 15-point peace plan that we're talking about that was unveiled by the Trump administration on Wednesday, it's essentially a take it or leave it situation. A top military spokesperson, according to the New York Post, and again, top, I think, is a very subjective term at this point. This guy's probably some, middle manager. Just a couple of weeks ago, he's now described as a top spokesperson, criticized any talks of a deal between Washington and Tehran, saying, quote, "Someone like us will never come to terms with someone like you." That is according to a video that was shared early in the day on Wednesday on the East Coast from the state-run Fars news agency in Iran. Now, while this top military spokesperson did not refer to the United States by name, but essentially branded Operation Epic Fury a, quote, defeat for the United States and accused Washington of making empty promises. Going on to say, the strategic power you used to talk about has turned into a strategic failure. And this is, folks, this is like high-level propaganda. Everything that you've seen over the last couple of weeks, this is what literal propaganda is. You've got a country that has been decimated by airstrikes from the U.S. and Israel. Absolutely decimated. And you've got this top leader, this top general telling the people this whole thing has been a failure. Meanwhile, their cities are in ruins. There's literal oil running down the sides of the streets that is on fire. It's like a volcano of gasoline and oil running down the streets of Tehran and other major Iranian cities. This is just insane. This top leader went on to say, the one claiming to be a global superpower would have already gotten out of this mess if it could. Don't dress up your defeat as an agreement. Your era of empty promises has come to an end. And it went on and on and on and on. Sure, take that for what it's worth. You got to look at the source with this stuff. But there are individuals within the Iranian government. Again, how high level these people are is kind of is an interesting game to play at this point because so much of that top leadership has been completely decimated. However, according to the New York Post, officials within the Islamic Republic have told countries trying to mediate peace talks within the region that, quote, "we don't want to be fooled again." So they have some reservations. They have some concerns that the United States is going to, quote unquote, fool them. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I believe that if Donald Trump is stating this stuff publicly, which he has been, and he has threatened and will continue to threaten the Iranian the Iranian government and the leadership, that he is going to follow through on his promise. If he says, these are the points that we need you to hit, and as a result of that, you will see many of the sanctions that have been issued by Western allies, you will see those evaporate within the span of days, that we will work with you so that you can develop a civil nuclear program that can be used to generate a very cheap, very affordable, very reliable electricity for your people. What Iran needs is to get back to where they were in the 1970s. Where you had a bustling society, where you had a middle class, a very prosperous nation. I see these pictures often flow by on social media. Go look at what Iran looked like in the 70s. It looked like a major U.S. city. Yeah, people out enjoying it, business thriving, everything was great. And now it's a third world country that has been controlled by the most recent supreme leader for years. The people are incredibly oppressed. It's a disaster. And I'm remembering back to the original comments that Donald Trump made when he announced on Saturday morning back a couple of weeks ago that these strikes had been officially carried out on Iran. And he spoke and said he was speaking directly to the Iranian people, saying, hey, if you want change, this is your chance to get it. And so, it's not only the United States that is going to be able to force this change, it's going to have to be the people. And I think when Donald Trump says, hey, you're going to want this stuff, You're going to have to want to go out and want it and grab it and get it. That's a very important part of this discussion as well. And so it's going to be very interesting to see within the next couple of days and potentially weeks how this plays out. Because this is not going to continue for months on end. Now, this is obviously a major political risk for President Donald Trump, but this is not going to go on for months. If the Iranians reject this 15-point plan and say, we're not doing it, we're not playing with the United States, then we're just going to continue to rebelize the whole rest of the country with these strategic airstrikes. And that's going to be the end of it. There's really not going to be anything else. Another comment coming in, Iranian citizens are reporting locations of troops that were responsible for killing citizens to Israel. The Israelis then call the troops, tell them they're about to die, and then kill them. I mean, there's total superiority over Iran right now. And again, just going back to the point of what is left. What are you holding on to if you're a top military official, quote unquote, in Iran right now? What exactly are you bargaining with? You're not playing with house money. You ain't got none. You've got no leverage. You've got a decimated country. You've got nothing that you can stand on. And so I suspect, and I could be wrong about this, but I suspect that we're probably going to see some pretty significant movement on this in the coming days. I really do believe that. Why? Because the president, I think, strongly understands that he is dealing with mounting and growing political pressure here stateside, whether it's the cost of gas, which is already moderating. The price of oil has continued to fall over the last couple of days. But more than anything else, the risk and the PTSD that the American people have as it relates to wars in the Middle East, where over the last 40 years, we have seen continued conflict in the with the United States through countries in the Middle East that just doesn't work out well, where attempts at regime change are not successful, where brave U.S. men in service, men and women of the U.S. military lose their lives. And then when, after 15 years of occupation, we leave and it all comes crumbling down. I would suspect, and I obviously can't say I know this for a fact, but I would suspect that the president very clearly understands how a lot of Americans think about this, that they're not interested in another forever war in the Middle East. And so the clock is ticking on this, I would say, very quickly. You've heard me use the runway analogy before as it relates to elections. The runway is getting shorter and shorter for this administration every day to come to a final plan on this whole thing. And so if the Iranians don't want to play ball, then we know what the end result's going to be. We're going to decimate their electrical grid. We're going to continue to kill their top targets, and the country's just going to be in ruin. And at that point, so be it. There's not going to be a military to mount offensive attacks. There's not going to be anybody left to lead over and harbor over a nuclear missile program. That's what's going to be left of Iran. And so, yes, the United States obviously has major involvement in this situation. No surprise there at all. But the people at a certain point are going to have to stand up for this thing as well. And it appears that they are. It's obviously hard to get accurate information out of Iran because they have got very limited internet infrastructure. They restrict the internet access, not too dissimilar from what you see in China, in Iran. Plus, at the same time, you've got so much of the Iranian infrastructure that has been decimated by the United States and Israel. So there's a whole bunch of different factors coming together that make this a very dynamic, very interesting, and very unique situation. So we'll once again see if what the public comments are from Iranian leadership is different than what is actually going on behind the scenes. There are reports that J.D. Vance needs to be a big topic of this as well. He needs to be an integral part of those negotiations. So we'll keep a close eye on that over the coming days, and we'll bring you the latest right here on the Nick Craig Show. So a busy Wednesday here. Quick programming note. We are off on a Friday. I've got a couple of things I've got to deal with on Friday. So no program on Friday. We'll, of course, be here tomorrow, Thursday. No show on Friday, but we'll be back with you Monday morning. However, regardless of whether we are on or not, a great opportunity to stay up to date with the latest statewide and international breaking news. Follow me over on X at Nicholas M. Craig, or like The Nick Craig Show over on Facebook. A great way to stay up to date with news outside of our podcast here each and every weekday morning. So that's going to do it for a Wednesday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Have a great rest of your day. We're back with you tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.